So if you're just joining, it's my first time using Zoom. We're trying to get everything set up so that we're going to have a really smooth transmission. And I really appreciate everyone just bearing with me and bearing with I will be introducing my special guest shortly, whose name is Alex Fairman, and he's going to be talking with you guys more about the Knights Templar and those mysteries. I'll be speaking more about the Magdalene Mysteries. And really, you know, this seminar is going to be devoted to the lost sort of Gnostic Christian, the lost spiritual mystery traditions, the lost Holy Sophia sacred feminine mystery traditions devoted to financial empowerment. So I really think this is going to be some pretty revelatory content for a lot of you who are here today. It's not something that I've really seen discussed effectively yet in our current society. A lot of this is lost medicine, lost wisdom. So just bear with us. We're going to get into it here shortly. And okay, we're going to mute you guys now, and then we're just going to set this up on my computer and we'll be good.
Okay.
So if I didn't get to say hello, welcome everybody. I see some names here. I see Justina and I see Anastasia from Canada. Welcome, guys. I am Cara Sophia, also known as Cara Gilligan, and I am a Magdalene priestess of the Rose Line of the Holy Sophia. I am a tantric wisdom teacher, and I am the creator of Sacred Wealth, which is the first spiritual mystery school and wealth and empowerment academy that is devoted to bringing these Magdalene mysteries for financial healing and financial empowerment back to humanity. Thank you. And Alex, do you want to be introduced?
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Fairman, and I'm joining this amazing channel today to bring forth some of what I know. I'm a spiritual teacher and an entrepreneur in the fields of education. I have some companies that are building revolutionary educational programs in our messed up high schools here in the United States, trying to improve the situation in all the ways that we can. And I also teach online under the moniker F Serpent. And I am a student and fascinated by the mysteries of the ancient world, especially those that are practical and relevant to our time today and that have the medicine that we need. So I am so honored and excited to be here with all of you.
Yeah, and I really invited Alex because I think one thing you failed to mention is like this is a genuine Lord of the Realm, a genuine sort of devotee of the Holy Sophia on a soul level, and guardian, I think, more of like the Templar mysteries and more of like the sacred masculine component of what we're going to be talking about today, which is the early Gnostic Christian movements in medieval Europe, and how at one point there was this feminine mysticism flowing through those early Christian communities. And we're going to be specifically talking about the relationship to, you know, that particular spiritual tradition in the formation of the banking system, the nobility, the royal structures in ancient Europe, and connecting all this back into Mary Magdalene's role as the financial supporter of Christ, and the Magdalene mysteries that are devoted to financial healing and financial empowerment. So this is something that is not really, I feel, on more of a collective level. It's not, did we log out there?
No, we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
And we're still setting things up, right? We're still setting things up. So yeah, we don't want to end this meeting. So if we can only be logged in here, we'll just only be logged in there.
Okay.
And is there any way we could just confirm that we're still logged in there?
Yeah, we're good. Just everyone give us a hello if you can hear us.
Yeah.
And if we're still on.
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Great.
Hello.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect.
Okay, wonderful. All right. All right. So, so today is going to be devoted to discussing these lost mystery traditions and how they are related to the transformation that we are all in at this particular point in our evolution on the planet right now. And well, here's what I want to say, and let me just bring up some notes. Like, this is why this conversation is important, because our world right now is suffering very tremendously from a lot of different things. But what we're going to be specifically looking at in this call today is that those who actually have what I call the divine right to rule, which means you have the spiritual consciousness, the consciousness of what I call, the noble heart or real nobility, compassionate, service to the divine, selflessness. Like, this is where your soul is coming from. You're an awakening soul that genuinely wants to serve the welfare of others. These types of people are not in power. And not only are we not in power, but most spiritual communities around the world actually promote poverty consciousness, helplessness, and dependency on power outside of oneself, whether that is how we are understanding our relationship to God, or whether that is how we've been conditioned through the current power systems in our world to understand authority as being like a hierarchical model outside of oneself. And so we're actually encouraged to take that on as a path of soul growth. And this is dangerous right now, because why? Because the needs of mankind have changed. And in this last age that we were in, it was what is called in the Eastern tradition, it was the Kali Yuga. It's the age of darkness. It's the age where the anti-divine or anti-matter principle really took over. And those of us who are what I call more of the ancient ones, more of the old souls, some people call us light workers, some people call us, spiritual aspirants. A lot of us are here on the planet today, some of the star seeds that are here. Those of us who have this, more subtle awareness and sensitivity to the greater sort of divine plan for both your own self and for us as a collective consciousness, and want to serve that awakening, want to serve the awakening of consciousness. Those of us who were of that kind of ilk in this last stage of time, we knew that the material plane was going to be taken over by more what I call gross consciousness oriented souls. So these are souls that are more materialistic. These are souls that are working through the consciousness of the animal nature. These are souls that are kind of embroiled in the limitations of identification with the body, and they haven't yet had that awakening. And we knew that these souls were going to take over. They were going to take over the world power system. And so in this last stage of time, if you were a spiritual aspirant, if you were a soul of a more, awakened consciousness, it actually behooved us. It behooved us to be retreated from the world system so we could protect our nadis, so we could protect the divine energy within us, and so we could hold it silently, while almost like our children had to kind of like go through their adolescence, right? They had to go through and just like work everything out. And now that has changed. That has changed because we're in a position now where the population on the planet has literally exploded. Humanity is approaching this tipping point, if not already there, as far as like a crisis with how do we as a species continue to live on this planet. There's an energy crisis, there's environmental crises going on. We're losing nature at a very, very, very fast rate. And if we don't have new leadership, if we don't have actual, like if there's not a shift in power that happens where the like the wisdom or the souls that have that connection to the divine plane do not kind of get their alignment, get their power on board in a worldly sense, we're not going to be able to effectively make this shift in consciousness. We actually need like new systems. We need practical change on the material level right now. And that's why you've seen for the last 100 years or so on Earth, you've been seeing like the Maya and the wisdom keepers and the yogis from the East. Everybody's coming to the West, right? Everybody's been coming out of hiding, coming out of the mountaintops, coming out of the monasteries, and trying to bring the ancient mysteries back forward to the Western civilization, because Western civilization has to activate. Western civilization has to is in charge, and specifically America has a very strong part of this destiny, but really it's just like, you know, the capitalistic democratic Western consciousness that has kind of become like this ruling force in the world has to now become like a union of the spiritual and the material. And so we all have a very important destiny. We have individual purposes in that, but there's a collective destiny for what I call the ancient ones, or the old souls, or the light workers, to assist in the awakening in and through, you know, the capitalist Western world system. And so what we are able to forge, you know, in the blending of heaven and earth, in the blending of like the highest of the high with the lowest of the low consciousness, will become the template that will allow, you know, humanity to move forward and to avert potential environmental catastrophe and potential loss of millions, if not billions, of human lives. So there's a very important reason for this. And I want to say that to kind of start this out, when humanity is in more of what we would call a golden age, so when humanity is in a time where the planet, where the earth plane is aligned with the galactic center. Right now, we just went through the furthest point away from the light, right? The galactic center, the galactic sun, the earth, the whole galaxy revolves around that. So we went from the furthest point away from the sun, and we are now moving. We're now moving back in. And when the earth plane is very close to the Om point, is very close to the is in harmony sort of with the light of consciousness. One of the things I'm going to be talking about today is the ancient royals and the ancient nobility, because in those times when the Om point and the earth is in a golden age, what happens in the how you have a society that functions holistically and harmoniously in alignment with divine principle is you will have the most pure souls, the ones that have the most advanced consciousness, actually hold the positions of leadership, the positions of rulership, the positions of wealth. They govern the rest of the civilization. And there's a very, very different consciousness in that than what we are typically taught in this point of time. We kind of think of like the accumulation of wealth and power from like a very selfish perspective, from a very need-based perspective, from a very like, gross world perspective. But there's another way of looking at the service that one can give through the distribution and the management and the stewardship of resources, and through the holding of sacred power in the world in order to serve the divine. And that is the kind of like the template of where I'm going to be speaking about, the Magdalene Mysteries for financial healing on this seminar here today. So if you are here, you've been called here, there's a divine purpose in you receiving these transmissions. And I just want to welcome you all and invite you now to just kind of tune in and to tune into the vision and the purpose that you know in your deepest heart of hearts, in your deepest soul, for why you are here on the planet at this time. And I want you to just allow that vision, close your eyes, and just allow that vision to expand, and to expand beyond the supposed limitations maybe that you are holding in place, because you might think, who am I to do that? Because you might think, I don't know how that would manifest in a material or on a financial level, because of maybe the fears of visibility that sit inside you, the fear of your own power. Most of us are very afraid of power at this particular point in humanity's evolution, because we've seen it abused so often, and we're afraid on a subconscious level that we might become like that if that power came to us. And just in this moment, I want you to imagine whatever is limiting you in your financial destiny and in your manifestation of your full power in the world. I just want you to imagine that all of those limitations are cleared. And if all of those limitations were cleared, and you could be this channel, right? This channel for the pure light of your soul, which is God, which is divine. So the pure light of God to just move completely through you. Who would you be? What would you do? What would be that greatest impact, that greatest level of service that you could make in the world? And really notice where in your body, where in your consciousness you're holding questions, doubts, resistance to that. And I want you to wrap those parts of yourself in love and just bring them forward now. Like, we have a beautiful virtual altar here. These are the offerings we're going to be making to the divine. I want you to take those parts of you that are in resistance to your own power, that are in resistance to wealth, that are in resistance to financial abundance, financial power, infinite power flowing through you. And I want you to just offer those up. Lay those on this table. Lay those on this altar. Because those are the things that are going to be healed in this particular seminar here today. And we just call upon the Holy Sophia, we call upon the Christ consciousness, Divine Mother, Father, God, to receive the offering of our fear, our doubts, and our limitations. We call upon the great Dakini, the great Dark Mother, to eat this offering and to free us from the shadow, to free us from the shadow of this last age and from the corruption that came into all of us with our understanding of finance, our understanding of money, with all of the different woundings that happened to humanity over time. And whatever our particular soul woundings were, and we just ask you to consume those fears, to consume that limitation, compost it, allow it to become fertile, new soil from which the beauty of our life purpose can grow and can flourish. We ask for everybody here to be blessed with the uprising of Shakti, with the uprising of the Magdalene Mysteries, of sacred financial empowerment, and that everything that takes place on this seminar here today is for our mutual highest good, the highest good of the planet, and the salvation of humanity, the awakening, the ascension, and the divine plan becoming realized in and through us. And so it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amen. Oh, okay.
That was amazing.
Thank you. All right. So, do you want to share anything, Alex? I'm just checking in.
I'm just basking in the bliss of what you bring through. So,
okay.
Why don't you take the lead and set me off the leash when it's time?
Okay, that sounds good. We're gonna set this one up for the Templar part of our talk. But I want to start by speaking about Mary Magdalene herself. So you guys came to this call because I am sounding the horn that Mary Magdalene is also a financial healing archetype, which is not something that we traditionally associate Mary Magdalene with. We tend to associate Mary Magdalene with roles like the Penitent Prostitute. We associate her with this role of extreme devotion to Yeshua, extreme devotion to Jesus Christ, thanks to some of the work of people like Dan Brown and the Da Vinci Code. We've now started to kind of question, maybe she was actually his wife. So we associate her now with sacred love, with being the feminine counterpart to the Christ consciousness. We associate her with sacred sexuality. Mary Magdalene has been a form of redemption for quote unquote fallen women. The Magdalene houses in Ireland, women that had children out of wedlock, prostitutes. Mary Magdalene has been an agent of healing for sexual abuse survivors. There's many, many testimonies around the world from women that are going through a healing process in that regard, and how Mary Magdalene helps them. So she is associated with all of these things in various communities. Now the Catholic Church has given her sort of the official title of the first apostle. So this is her new kind of, her new title. It just came out in 2016. Many of us were very happy to have that corrected, that she was not a prostitute and that she's actually a very powerful teacher herself, and carried the word of Christ to Europe, and was like a teacher and a powerful activator herself. But I don't typically see her the role she played as the financial support behind Christ's ministry and his work talked about. And what's really funny about this is a lot of those roles of Mary Magdalene that I just mentioned are more of like a sort of like a mystical thing, a secret thing that kind of gets revealed through individual revelations, and maybe secret societies coming out and sharing like the Grail mysteries that they've been hiding for thousands of years. And we're like wondering, is it really true? Was she the wife of Christ? Is there a bloodline? Is she really a prostitute? Is she a sexual healer? Like all these things. None of those things are actually discussed like in the Bible. Not even the prostitute thing is actually said in the Bible. Not even that. There's nebulous references to like Jesus with healing a prostitute, and they just like made that into Mary Magdalene. There's never once said that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. That's been, all of these have been things that have come through a canonical definition of who Mary Magdalene is. Here's the funny thing. It is canonical. It is in the Bible. It is expressly stated that Mary Magdalene was financially supporting Christ and the disciples. So I have that quote. It's Luke 8:22, that there were women who had been healed of evil spirits, of which one of whom was Mary called Magdalene, who were then supporting Christ and the disciples out of their personal means. And we also have like the woman with the alabaster jar. Many people associate that figure with Mary Magdalene. She's anointing Christ before he is crucified with a perfume that, one of the other disciples, likely Peter, we don't know, kind of comes forward and is like, woman.
Definitely Peter.
Definitely Peter. Woman, we could have used that. We could have sold that perfume for a year's worth of wages. So we know that whoever this woman was with the alabaster jar, she was very wealthy. She had a perfume that was worth a year's worth of wages that she was anointing Christ's feet with. And he's saying, why would you let this woman do this when we could have sold that and given all that money to the poor? And Christ sort of stops. I'm going to say Peter, but whoever it was, Christ sort of stops him and be like, you will always have the poor with me, but he knows you're only going to have me with you for one more day. Like, let this woman make her offering. So what we know is that Mary Magdalene was one of multiple wealthy women that were financially supporting Christ. And there is a very important mysticism there that has been lost from the world. Why is it that when the divine masculine, when the Adi Shakti, like the ultimate manifestation of Shakti's realization as the Christ, when the Adi Shakti comes in to a planetary system, why is the Adi Shakti supported financially, or what we might say materially, by wealthy women? And I want to tie this in because those of you who don't know me, like I'm a devotee in this life of a spiritual master who I actually hold within my heart as being the Christ of this age. His name is Avatar Meher Baba. And this happened in Baba's incarnation as well. So I'm just going to talk about Baba's incarnation. He dropped his body in 1969. But Baba, in the Western world, all of his primary disciples were females, and they tended to be powerful, wealthy females that were supporting him in India and supporting his work coming into the West. So this happens. This is not just unique to the man called Yeshua. This is not just unique to Meher Baba. This happens when you see the Christed consciousness materialize on this plane. There is a specific role for the empowered, the materially empowered feminine principle to be financially or materially supporting the Christ. And one of the things that I want to say is that this is a revelation of something that we have forgotten on a soul level, which is that it is the goddess that really, when we look at like what material consciousness actually is, the material world is a manifestation of the spiritual principle of Shakti or of Prakriti. Okay, so material abundance is an aspect of feminine power. It's an aspect of the divine feminine. And when you look into humanity's hidden past, most abundance rituals, most lost prosperity rituals were not done to gods, were not done to male or masculine deities. If you wanted to call abundance into your life, you went to the Divine Mother. You went to Lakshmi. You went to Hathor. You went to Isis. You went to a form of the sacred feminine, because the sacred feminine is the embodiment of mother, of matter, of material consciousness. So why is this significant? Why is that significant for us today? Because we have been stripped. We have been stripped of a sacred understanding for material reality. In our Judeo-Christian system and in our Western consciousness system, we have been taught separation. We've been taught that the material world is the lower nature, it's bad, it's wrong, the sins of the flesh, money and God should be separate things. We have been taught, and corresponding with this, some of my other work, the Magdalene wounds, is this shaming, this demonizing, this casting out, this forgetting of the goddess. We don't even want to honor her anymore. She's gone, goodbye. And so then what happens to the material nature, it's opened to being ruled by unconsciousness. It's open to being ruled by demonic entities, unconscious energy in humanity. It's no longer sacred. And we have created money is the root of all evil because we forgot, because we were either forcibly, forced to let go of these traditions, forced to let go of this consciousness by dominating cultures that wanted to control people, that wanted to control power. And so what do you do when you want to cut the people off from their power? You cut them off from their traditions. You cut them off from the sacred mother, which is the source of power. Power in the tantric traditions is understood to be an aspect of Shakti as well. We think about power in our Western culture, we think about power as force over, like dominating or forcing something to happen. We have power, right? We have power to make something happen. But in tantric traditions, power is understood to be an aspect of Shakti. And power is actually the ability to manifest. Okay, it's the ability to manifest. It's understood to come from the sacred feminine. The feminine is manifesting everything. She's manifesting all the realms of nature. When you look at a woman, where does the child come from? The child comes through the female body, right? The female body can take nothingness and create something from it. So power was always in the ancient traditions understood to be an aspect of Shakti, and the ability to create, the ability to manifest was something that came, obviously it comes from a joint sort of collaboration between the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, but more of the Shakti is stored in the feminine. The feminine is meant to be the steward of the material creation, is meant to be the steward there. And so, it's a dark age. It's a very dark age when women are cut off from being from having their voices and their wisdom heard, and how a society structures itself materially. It's a very dark age when you have currency that is thought of as being completely unsacred and not connected at all to, the divine feminine or to God in any way, shape, or form. This is what allows us to have what we have manifested in the world today. And so Mary Magdalene, she was a woman from a wealthy family. She was a woman that in that time would have been considered like Jewish aristocracy, okay? And as a woman from a wealthy, a powerful Jewish family, I'm going to be speaking some of what I believe and some of what has been revealed to me. She was trained in the mystery traditions, in the mystery schools of Egypt. That's where she received her education. She was trained in the awareness of the feminine principle's role as the counterpart to the divine masculine. She knew that she was going to be meeting a Christ in that age. She was trained to be the feminine counterpart. And one of the things that she held, amongst others, yes, she was trained to be a holy grail. She was trained to hold Christ in like an absolute state of adoration and love as the Shakti, as the cup of life that was holding, this water of life, this sacred masculine consciousness for the world. She was also trained to understand the ancient priestess traditions, because in ancient Egypt, In ancient Egypt, at one point, the pharaohs worked very closely with the priestesses of Hathor. They worked very closely with the goddesses of nature that could connect to the earth. I always say, before there was money, there was mother. Before we had money, we understood material abundance to be, hey, are the crops going to grow this year? Like, is the Nile going to flood enough? Are we going to get what we need to produce? And they had to work with the priestesses to understand the level of abundance that was going to be coming for them. And the pharaohs and the queens would work directly with the priestesses. And so she knew this, and she knew about the ancient role of, the pharaoh as an agent of divine consciousness. She knew about the ancient role of the nobility of the world, the royals, so to speak. At one stage in humanity's past, these royals were agents of the divine. These were advanced souls that dedicated their whole lives, whether they were priests or priestesses, or whether they were the monarchs and the priests and the priestesses all worked together to sort of channel the divine plan. They had the role of being in power was not something that you would ever want to seek for your own self. It was a total surrender. It was a total state of humility, service to others, where you would just be devoting your whole life really to channeling the highest good for the people. And this system was at one point in ancient Egypt, and before that in Atlantis, and before that into the really lost traditions, things like Lemuria and things on this planet. That was how things were done. And these mysteries were taught. They were taught in the Egyptian mystery schools, of which I believe both Mary and Jesus had activation in these, like before his ministry, when they were in their 30s, and she was trained, he was trained, they knew about this, right? And so one of the things that I teach is that Mary Magdalene, after the crucifixion, she came into first England, where she spent time in Avalon with the priestesses of Avalon doing activation in Lower England. And then she went down into France. And Mary Magdalene, in this time after the crucifixion and the resurrection, she came into the Western world. Not all the disciples came in. I actually believe Jesus went to India. I don't believe he just was there for 5 days and ascended into heaven. He went into India. The different disciples went to different parts of the world. Peter came down into Rome and sort of started that whole thing. Mary Magdalene came into England first and then France. And there was a reason that Mary Magdalene had to come to the West. She was sent to the West. It wasn't just coincidence that Mary Magdalene came into the West and sowed the seeds of what she sowed in Western, the roots of Western consciousness. The reason Mary Magdalene came to Western civilization is because they knew what was going on in the world. They knew that they were in a dark age. They knew that even more oppression of the feminine principle was going to come. They knew that the West was going to become this, militant force that would eventually take over the whole earth plane. And they knew that the lost sacred feminine wisdom had to be seeded into this culture. So when Mary Magdalene came, she came with that understanding, and she came to seed that wisdom. And she activated many of you who are here today, many of us who are teaching from the Gnostic Christian perspective, or we know on a past life level that, we were followers of Christ, that we were there in ancient France, in medieval France, in medieval England. We know that we were one of the ones that she transmitted the wisdom through, or through the groups of people that she activated. But she came over and she did a lot of different work. But one of the things that I teach, if you take some of my other programs like the Magdalene Wounds and study with me in some of my other work, is that she initiated a secretive order of European priestesses who I call the Magdalenes. And she taught them the mysteries of sacred love, sacred sensuality, sexuality, the divine feminine, the path of sacred union, the mystery school traditions in Egypt, of which her and Yeshua together sort of became like the living incarnation of Isis and Osiris. They were like the fulfillment of that tradition. And one of the things that she also taught the Magdalenes was she taught them about the lost traditions of sacred wealth. She taught them about the lost role of the nobility. She taught them that, you know, the monarchs, the kings, the queens, the aristocracy are meant to be sacred leaders. They're meant to be highly spiritually advanced souls that are stewarding the creation from a place of selfless service. And she taught them that women had a very important role to play in holding the consciousness of sacred wealth and the connection between women and the material abundance of the earth. And these were all things that were given to us, that were activated in us. And the most of the women that were initiated in that time were women like into the most advanced mysteries that Mary Magdalene taught. We were actually from like noble families in Europe. We were from the aristocracy. So she went through and activated the aristocracy in these traditions. Now she did other things. There was more that went on. But that was one of the things that she did. And so the early Christians, the Magdalenes, who, you know, from my understanding in that age, I think she was activating couples. It wasn't, you know, she activated the women as the Magdalenes, but she was trying to activate, you know, Isis and Osiris, right? To help to rule, you know, the Western world in this sacred consciousness. Now, she knew that, you know, she was going to do this work and then it was going to get obliterated, right? Because the world had to go. And I feel that like my role right now is to be like, yes, this happened, guys. And now it's time for the West to awaken this. And this was one of the reasons that she did this work. So what I would like to kind of move into now is how these Sophia mysteries, these Magdalene mysteries, and these mysteries of sacred wealth for a period of about 1,000 years did form the banking system, the financial system, and the nobility structures of medieval Europe. What happened? When was that shift that took place where the Sophia consciousness and the sacred feminine consciousness was eradicated from the royal lines, was repressed, and we went into the next 1,000 years, which kind of has resulted in where we are today. And to do this, I think it's important that we talk about the Templars, and I would like to invite Alex here to discuss that point.
Why, thank you. So let's just launch right into this. So Mary Magdalene sets out with a few of her group, and there was certainly a schism of the disciples between a more of a masculine around Simon Peter, aka the Rock, and their squad who went to Rome and the local area. And then there was the other side, which is Mary's squad, which included Joseph of Arimathea and some of her fellow initiates, and they take off, right? Old Man Joe, I picture a lot like Obi-Wan Kenobi in the story, right? He's just kind of the wealthier, older guy watching out for everybody. And they go to England, like you say. There's a rose bush in Glastonbury, which is legendary to be planted by Joseph of Arimathea. You can decide if you want to believe that or not. But they end up in the southern France area, the Languedoc, right? And the mysteries that Mary imparted the teachings of what she experienced with Yeshua and all of the things she learned from Egypt were dropped into southern France. And this is why southern France comes up again and again and again throughout the mysteries and throughout the way the story goes. Mm-hmm. So in these priestess initial initiations that went on in southern France, it seeded this incredible energy there. And there's also the debate of whether or not Mary was also carrying Jesus's child, which again is a very hotly debated thing. I personally believe that she did have a child and an offspring, and that there is a bloodline of Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ. And that's been something that I've been on a quest for many years to uncover the answers to that. And I've come to the conclusion that yes, indeed, that is as it was. And this bloodline became known as the Merovingians. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Merovingians, but that is referring to the true bloodline of Magdalene and Yeshua.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Merovingians, and the Merovingians were also a name that was later adopted by the French royalty, because the French royalty initially were members of the same line of initiation.
Right. So basically, the original, what we're trying to say is that the royalty in Europe was originally initiated by Mary Magdalene, potentially even her actual bloodline, okay? Her and Yeshua's bloodline. So I really want you guys to get that. I really want you to let that sink into your soul, right? That the destiny for who is meant to be in wealth and in power in the Western world is meant to be the twin flame sacred union of like Christ consciousness with the sacred feminine consciousness. This is what her work was trying to bring about for our culture. Okay, just let that sink into you, that the sacred consciousness, the sacred ones, the spiritual ones, the ones that are manifesting the divine diaspora, we're meant to be the ones that are in power. So let that sink in. I'll let you keep going.
Right. And to this day, so for those of you who don't know, if you ever see the symbol of a pine cone in these ancient locations, like if you go to Rome or you go to Paris or you go to Versailles or you go to these places in Europe, the pine cone was a sacred symbol, because the pine cone symbolizes that one was an initiate in the mysteries. The pine cone is actually a big blown up representation of what you have in the middle of your head, which is your pineal gland. If you look at your pineal gland, which is referred to by the mystics as the third eye, it literally looks like a pine cone. And in the being initiated in the mystery schools, after you had done your preparatory work, you were taken to an initiation experience where the energy from your lower centers, from your chakras, were pulled up the spine, would come around what's called the shepherd's crook, and would reach your third eye, which would represent a moment of illumination. At which point the lower density was cleared and you were prepared to be a ruler of your society.
Right. So what had to happen? You had to be awakened. You had to have like the dual serpents having gone all the way up the sign and like turned your God consciousness on. You had to have the halo. You had to have the sainted consciousness of divine realization to be a ruler. And what Alex is saying is that the original iconography of even ancient France reveals that they knew this, that this was taught, and that this was sought after. It was once something that was like promoted and practiced, that as a leader, you were also an aspirant, that you were a sacred leader. Okay?
Yes. And to this day, you can go to the Palace of Versailles, right? When I was in the palace, you look at all the different rulers of France throughout its history. And if you look at these statues, starting at around the 5th century or the 6th century, every single one of those kings and queens is holding a staff with a pine cone on it. Every single one until the 13th century, when everything changed. And we'll talk about what changed in a second. But all of those leaders, those rulers of immense wealth and power, were students of the spiritual mysteries. That's what prepared them to wield that kind of power.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what happened, Alex, that changed everything?
What changed everything? So now just one other thing, the wisdom and the mysteries of Mary Magdalene were transmitted through the French royalty. It was also transmitted through the French southern countryside. And there were many movements in history where this divine Sophia, this love, this energy manifested in France in the form of the Cathars, which were a renegade Christian sect who believed that sex was good, who had both female and male priests, and who, of course, were violently eradicated by the Pope Innocent III, interestingly enough, in a 20-year brutal campaign called the Albigensian Crusade. But in other places in France, it manifested as well. The courts of courtly love were in southern France. Like this was like...
And England.
And England,
yes.
But more in France. I mean, this is where this divine feminine consciousness was flowering, and there would be these knights who would come to these castles, and they would joust, and they would write love letters and poetry to the lady that they were jousting for, and there would be, you know, these romantic, passionate love affairs, and women were actually allowed to have multiple lovers, or it was understood that they were free. And there was this whole different culture.
One thing I will say is, like, when you look at the history of the world, that courtly period of romantic love is actually the first and only time that you really see romantic love celebrated by humanity as a whole. Like the arranged marriage and, you know, union for the sake of utility or for the sake of, you know, just like duty was really the go-to way that we understood human love. So the sacred sexual priestess and the sacred love path, the path of twin flame union, and the path of this sacred wealth consciousness were very unified. They're very much one. And all of this was basically initiated by Mary Magdalene.
Right.
Yeah.
So these mysteries wove their way into many pieces of southern France and the French kingdoms. And specifically, if you've ever heard of the Knights Templar, they've become more popularized in recent times. And there's a popular line of video games discussing them, which actually vilify them. And more people are learning about this now. But the Templars are extremely important. Right around 1100 to 1109, these 9 French knights, who I believe were also informed of the mysteries, they were initiates, they received a vision from God, and they went to the Holy Land, where they lived in Jerusalem, which had just been recaptured by the Christian Crusaders. They lived there for 9 years. They went to the mayor of Jerusalem and they asked to dig under Solomon's temple. And there they sat and dug for 9 years. We didn't hear much from them. And after 9 years in 1118, they come out and they brand themselves the poor Knights of the Temple of Christ, right? And they became the Knights Templar. And their signifier was a coin with 2 knights riding on 1 horse, which was part of their branding as the poor knights, because they didn't have enough horses for everybody. So they had to put 2 guys on each horse. So, yeah, it's funny. So these guys, right, these 9 French knights who come from France, where all these mysteries propagate, go to Jerusalem, they dig under Solomon's temple, and overnight, this order blows up, okay? This is like, they would have been like the Uber of that time, or the Facebook of that time. They became so powerful and so wealthy in an extremely short period of time. They received a papal edict that exempted them from the rule of the church. So before, the church could come along and basically whack anybody, and the church was the absolute arbiter of the law in that time. And the Templars were exempt, right? What happened? What did they know? What did they discover? And what of the mysteries were they carrying that allowed that to happen? Because the Templars overnight became powerful. Royals and nobles throughout Europe sent their princes, their sons to join the order. And in order to join the order, and the reason this is connected to what Kara's doing with Sacred Wealth, is that this organization was devoted to sacred wealth initially. They had, when you joined the order, you would give up your own belongings. You pledged poverty and your belongings were donated to the order. You pledged chastity. You pledged obedience. You literally put yourself in service to their divine mission.
Would it be okay if I just spoke a little bit on that in relationship to this sacred wealth process? Because, you know, it's really funny. I hold sacred wealth and I teach sacred wealth. Somebody came to visit me at my house, which is like literally in the country, in a very, very poor rural community. I actually live across from Poverty Branch Road. And one of the things that I tell a lot of people that want to study with me and they want to practice like sacred wealth consciousness is I say, like, I don't own anything. Like, one of the things that I had to go through when I started Waking Beauty, like the very first year that I started Waking Beauty, I put, you know, my 401k and whatever savings that I had into starting the business. And I was like funding it right out of my own means. And then I worked like a series of part-time jobs, because at that point I didn't believe in myself, and I didn't feel confident receiving money for my work. And I was still operating under, you know, like, oh, I should give my work away for free, selfless service, you know, money is separate from God. I was operating under all of these things that so many of us inherit under this time. And at the end of my first year, when I was doing my taxes, everything that I had put into the business exactly equaled all the income that I had made that year. And I literally had a zero. And like, I was doing this online and I'm trying to submit my taxes. And it was like $0. I made $0 this year. And like the tax system that I was using was like, yeah, you don't need to file taxes if you didn't make any money. I'm like, no, I need to file my taxes. But it was very significant. It's very significant because there is this like, in order to really practice sacred wealth, it's just like, in order for me to be a very good channel and to do a great Akashic reading for somebody, I almost need to be at zero, right? There needs to be no Kara consciousness. I need to be purely able to allow the divine to work through me. And in order for that to happen, I have to be fully surrendered, and I have to be cleared of my own, what my human self, what my human ego thoughts and things would put into that. And I say this to people that practice sacred wealth. I'm like, sacred wealth is not about how much money you make. It's not about becoming the richest person in the world. What sacred wealth is ultimately about is it's ultimately about serving the divine in and through how you relate to money. It's ultimately about allowing yourself to become a channel for the divine to manifest through you, for the divine to materialize the divine plans, whatever those are, through you. And in order to do that, we almost have to be in this state of surrender, in this state of being at zero. And there is this sort of like sacred relationship between sort of like the poor, humble servant archetype as being what actually underlies the consciousness of the most noble ruler, of the most magnificent queen, of the most magnificent noble king. In order to be a noble king or a noble queen, you need to have that humble, poor nature of the servant deeply embedded into your heart. And so I think that's one of the beautiful things about the Templars when they first were formed as an order, is they had that going. But Alex, tell us what happened.
Well, you see, as all good things do when they in material realm over time. The Templars lost some of that initial God spark wisdom. But I want to say one more thing before I tell you the terrible story of why we all to this day fear Friday the 13th. And that is that the Templars also had an inner initiation. So the Templars had like this bigger outer thing with all their regular kind of guys and all their attendants, which was like, we're Catholic, we're Roman Catholic, nothing to see here. We've got a big, it's in fact, we're going to make it so obvious for you that we're going to put like a red cross as our logo. So you never question it. But inside of that inner circle was the mysteries, these same Magdalene Sophia mysteries that you are all studying with Kara about, and that she is such an amazing transmitter of for all of us. And that's what they were really running on. And if you really study the order and you study how it changed over the centuries, that's the core. One of the core teachings was this divine feminine consciousness that was the key to real sustainable power.
Mm-hmm. So the Templars were protecting that in secret. They were initiated into that. They couldn't claim it on the outer level because of the Pope in Rome and everybody being under obligation to be adhering to the Roman Catholic religion. But in secret, these Templars were devoted to the Sophia. They were they had received this wisdom of the Magdalene Mysteries. They were protecting it. And I think what would be helpful is just to kind of describe, like, the Templars really were the foundation of what is the modern day banking system that we have in the West today. Because why? One of the things that the Templars did was they were guardians of the pilgrims so there were pilgrimages being made to the Holy Land. And do you want to?
Yeah, so that was their ostensible purpose, was we're like a VIP protection service / general security force between the Holy Land and Europe. I mean, that was the purpose officially. But they blew up because of the secret knowledge they found at Solomon's Temple, because of the initiations they offered, and because of the great PR campaign. They had amazing PR. All the nobles joined them and they became very rich because of this mission of service they were on. And there's a huge lesson for us here. The Templars took on this, we're going to protect the pilgrims, we're going to serve, and as a result, and we have secret knowledge, and people kind of know this, and as a result, everyone wants in and money is thrown at them, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have 2,000 estates in Europe, in Germany, in France, in the Holy Land. And it was the medieval ATM. You could literally go to a commandery in France, deposit your gold, and instead of having to carry your gold in some rickety cart along these dangerous roads with bandits, you could just have your little note sealed, and you would take it to the Templar commandery in the Holy Land, and they would give you your gold. It was like a medieval ATM.
Mm-hmm. The foundation of banking.
Yeah.
Protect your money until you need it. And there was no usury at that time. There was no interest that they charged or anything. Because why? Because these Templars took the vows of poverty, and they were serving. They were serving the sacred consciousness in humanity, which it would be really great if our modern day banking system understood that as well.
Yes. And so what happened was the Templars over time, the wealth did start to change them. They lost touch with that sacred wealth vibration, that sacred wealth consciousness, which founded the order. And right around the late 1200s to early 1300s, there's definitely a corruption that entered into that, to the Templar organization. It got too big. People began to abuse the power. They forgot what its purpose was. And they made enemies in their arrogance. And one of the enemies they made was Philip the Fair.
Yeah, because by this time, the Templars really were more powerful than the monarchy. They had, many times pilgrims wouldn't come back. They would die on the road to Jerusalem. And so they would accumulate those people's lands and their wealth. And so over time, over several hundred years, the Templars became extremely rich. And that was more when I think some of the corruption came in, and then there's a period with what happens. You're going to tell them about King Philip.
Right. So our homie King Philip, or Philip the Fair, it's like all the worst people have these wonderful names in history. Pope Innocent III, who kills like 1 million people. Pope Philip the Fair, who like won't pay his debts to the Templar. So Philip got himself in some trouble because the Templars were financing him and his kingdom. And he was he was the king of France. So he had a huge army that would do what he asked. And he decided that he was going to eliminate the Templars. And he had a two-stage plan for doing so. And so one night on Friday the 13th, 1307, there were French soldiers sent out to every known Templar commandery under their influence. Templars were all rounded up. They were brought into prisons and they were tortured. Many false confessions were extracted from them, and perhaps some real confessions, which, when brought before the Pope, appeared that the Templars were guilty of heresy, of turning against the beliefs of Catholicism for something else. And as a result, many of the Templars were burned at the stake. They were brutally murdered, and with them went much of the Sophia wisdom. Now, some of them knew this was coming, but I just want to stop for a second and say this is part of why Friday the 13th is an unlucky day. Like, why is it that we believe that? It's because the effect in the public psyche is still so great that it's carried across 700 years.
And can you talk about what happened with the monarchy after that? So it was almost like when the Templars were killed, there was a real shift now in how the nobility of medieval Europe began to operate, because at this you can go ahead here, but at this particular point, you now had the monarchy ruling by the spear.
Right? So Philip and the king right before him were not initiates of the mysteries. They were warrior kings. They did not understand the sacred and divine principles. And that's why when you look at their statues in the Palace of Versailles, right at that 13th century mark, the rulers of France cease to hold pine cones, staffs, and they start holding swords and spears.
Right. So this is how, I think this is a really good segue point, because this is how progressively over time, we went from, having a consciousness and it's even like a microcosm of an even, a larger shift in consciousness that took place over even longer period of time, where you have the royal lines going from being sacred initiates themselves, activating the pineal gland, activating the God consciousness within them, becoming agents of the divine and becoming selfless servants in order to serve the people, to now you have the monarchs, instead of holding the pineal gland as being like what helps them rule, now they're holding a sword. So we have this shift where we're now moving into a violent or an oppressive sort of like dominator culture structure for what, money and power is ultimately about. And we've moved away from, the Holy Sophia mysteries and money and power being a manifestation of those that have the divine right to rule, which is the awakening of God consciousness within them. So I'd just like to take this and segue a little bit into, my personal experience and talking with you a little bit about sacred wealth and how do we go about reawakening this consciousness and what is our role in this modern time? Because, my early experiences in this life, for those of you who are just getting to know me, I went to an Ivy League school very early on. And in America, Ivy League schools are sort of like the breeding ground, right, for the future money power elite of at least America or of the Western world. And I remember, you know, being a young girl and growing up and hungering to actually get to a place like Dartmouth or like Harvard or in my mind, that was where you went to become God realized. That's what I thought. I was like waiting. I was like, when am I going to go, like, sort of be with people of my kind, like people that really want to help heal the world, and where I'm going to get like training and initiation and into how to be like this sacred, you know, this sacred leader. And I was like holding that in my heart, like the ancient priestess in me, the ancient like royal in me was like just like kind of biding my time, waiting for when this was going to happen. I remember even like talking about it sometimes with my friends. And then like I got up there, and those of you who know my story, I did not see this being taught at Dartmouth. I saw a tremendous, you know, a tremendous level of nepotism and greed and corruption and selfishness, and this sort of consciousness of, you know, hey, we have the red carpet rolled out for us. We can do whatever the fuck we want with the plebes of society. We can like, plebeians, which is a Roman term for commoners. And Dartmouth had this really insane fraternity culture. I was sexually assaulted within 2 weeks. I was sort of thrown into a bathroom stall by the son of a senator who I thought was going to be my friend. And he's just like not asking permission and just taking whatever he wants. Luckily, I got him off of me, and I was very frightened, right? Because Dartmouth was a school that had a really, really strong patriarchal tendency. It was the last Ivy League school to go co-ed. They were forced by the federal government to let women in. There was a long hidden history since the late 70s, early 80s of rape and misogynistic songs being created. And there was like a real strong hatred for the feminine principle, and like a violent binge drinking culture that was running the social scene there. And to top it all off, I finally ended up getting a boyfriend that was a brother in a fraternity called Bonesgate. And the Bonesgate culture was deeply based around sort of like worshiping this mascot of the thick dick. It was literally a phallic ghost in the shape of a dick and balls, and looked like a little demon. And they did violent hazing rituals. There was a rage cage. All of the tests of power centered around how deeply you could be disassociated from your feminine and not be a pussy, and how much you could force, like through violence, demonstrate your own power. And, you know, the brothers were bonded through shameful and humiliating things done in secret. They were taught violence as a form of power, and they were taught that, you know, to be a ruler, you had to be like totally cut off from your compassionate heart, from your feeling nature, from any care for your body. This was done through, you know, through alcohol and drug abuse and physical abuse of these men, so that, you know, now when they go on to become the rulers of our civilization, what do they know? They know that they can do shameful and humiliating things that dishonor their souls, and they keep that secret, and they're all going to keep it all secret. So we have all kinds of corruption that goes on in our political systems, in our banking system, in the money power elite of our world in this modern age. They are taught, you know, I talk about this every day. I was talking with my sister's husband's father as I was learning about his career in sales for in the manufacturing industry. And he was telling me about, you know, this move that he made where he sort of like got a better offer from a competitor and switched sides. And, you know, I just was asking, like, how did that make you feel in your heart, you know, to kind of like quote unquote betray the company that you were with and go with this other company. And it's like, how many times do you hear people when they're talking about, you know, making it in the business, I don't know that, in the business world, how many times you hear people say it's just business? Like, that's just how we do it, right? That's just how we do it. You can't have a compassionate heart. You can't care. You're out for yourself. You're out for your number one. And this is the consciousness that is causing inordinate levels of suffering for all beings, for all of us. And even if you weren't, let's say, even if you weren't, you know, in Bonesgate and you didn't get sort of like the underground scoop that I got, where you could see that this is how like those were black magic rituals. Those are rituals of initiation that those brothers were going through. And even if you weren't there and you didn't receive those initiations, you didn't see the black magic yourself, we are all of us are deeply coded with that on a subconscious collective level. And so what my mission is now, with bringing the Magdalene Mysteries of sacred wealth and true financial empowerment back into the world, is that I am here because I want to basically create a mystery school, create a training for those of us who know on a soul level that we are actually here to be in deep service to humanity at this time, okay? That we know that we are here to help with the awakening of consciousness. And if you know that in order for you to fulfill your mission, you're actually meant to be operating at a really high level of wealth or a really high level of impact in the world. And you'll know this. You can feel it in your heart. You can feel it based on the visions that are revealed to you by spirit, about what you're here to do. You know, I speak with people all the time that see these very large visions for, you know, retreat centers and companies that they want to create, and how they want that spark that's in them to reach as many people as you can. But we get held up as light workers, as spiritual aspirants, as those who are raising the serpents and seeking to awaken our divine consciousness, seeking to become self-realized on a spiritual level. We get held up and we get blocked by the programming. I sometimes call it this black magic programming that came into the money system, many of which, all of this programming is attached to these very deep woundings, these historical things that have happened, and then everything that happened after that, slave trades, genocide of the native and the indigenous peoples across the earth, the witch burnings, everything that happened, which basically then cuts us off, right? It cuts us off from Mary Magdalene, it cuts us off from the Sophia. We are literally taught to be in a state of disassociation from that if we want to be wealthy, if we want to be powerful. I speak with women all the time that have these deep-seated resistances. They don't even understand why they're not manifesting money. Well, you're not going to be manifesting money if in the back of your mind you're associating becoming powerful with becoming an oppressor. You're not going to be able to manifest your purpose if you associate money with a form of evil, if you associate money with a form of violence, if you associate power with oppression of others, you know. And so we have to deprogram ourselves. We have to do the healing work, number one, that's necessary, and the reprogramming work in our subconscious mind of our relationship to money, our relationship to wealth. We have to start to remember and reach this higher plane, that pine cone level of consciousness, the halo consciousness of that sacred leader. We have to go through our own healing practices to ensure that as we awaken, we can hold power. Oh, I just hate that. air conditioner. I hope you guys can still hear us. There's like this really loud air conditioner here. But we have to go through these initiations to understand that we can hold power, that we can trust ourselves, right? That we can trust our own connection to the divine, that we're being divinely guided, that it's almost like, here's what I found. Like, I'm not able to up level in my business or grow to the next level if I'm still operating from like Kara consciousness and I've got all my fears and I've got all my limiting beliefs and I've got all my deep karmic wounds running me unconsciously. Where I need to be is in this place of this ecstatic surrender, right? In this place of like this humble surrender and this like complete opening of myself, like use me as a channel. And when I am in that place, you know, and the idea comes in and I can just follow it. And you almost have to have a very loose relationship to you can't have very strong attachments to money in order to actually channel sacred wealth. You have to be that Knight of Templar, right? You have to be that early Magdalene, that Mary Magdalene that follows the calling of spirit in order to do this effectively. So at this particular time, I really just want to say that, you know, if you are interested in, you know, going on that deeper journey of really, truly awakening the Magdalene Mysteries, of becoming and embodying the Sophia wisdom in and as an expression of wealth and power in your life, you're somebody who wants to like become a channel of service in the world. You want to be able to be financially free, like even more than financially resourced. I want to talk about what it means to be financially free, which means you're not running anxiety and fear and like limiting, constricting things like slave consciousness, like tyrant consciousness, like all these things, like the wounding of your people. If you have like a native money wound going on, you're not running all these things and they're coming up and they're blocking you. They're blocking you from actually stepping into your power as a sacred agent of divine consciousness and a sacred ruler, sacred leader in the world. If this is something that you know you want to study, I think the first thing that I will say is like, take what we've shared here today really into your hearts and understand that there genuinely is a spiritual path of service, a karma yoga path that you can realize in and through your relationship to money, that you can become a steward again for the protection of the earth, for the protection of the sacred, for the protection of the divine feminine, like in and through how you relate materially and how you relate using your own power source. And so I'm just going to introduce you to the Sacred Wealth Academy, which is a 9-month initiation. It's a healing modality. It's a mystery school, and it is a spiritual path for those serving the sacred, for those who are here to become sacred leaders, who are here to become wealthy, noble kings and queens, sacred rulers in your community, and you are ready to go through the alchemical journey, the awakenings of the serpents, the activation of the pineal gland, the reprogramming of your money story, and the initiations of the ancient kings and queens, so that you can hold this consciousness of sacred wealth effectively within your own life. So I'm going to give you guys the URL because you can read about it there. It's wakingbeauty.com/Sacred Wealth Academy. And I'm just going to pull it up so that I can go over some of the things that we will be learning. This is a 9-month mystery school. And I want to be really clear, this is not a business training, okay? This is not a nuts and bolts marketing, sales, business strategy. We will have some elements of, you know, application to the field of like concrete business in the academy. But ultimately, this is a spiritual journey. This is a sacred journey. This is the initiation that Mary Magdalene, if you had been in ancient France, this is the initiation that Mary Magdalene would have given the nobles to create the Merovingian, what is it?
The Merovingians.
The Merovingian line, to create the sacred royals, right? The sacred nobility. These are the initiations that they would have gone through. And yeah, it's taken me like 15 years to bring this back through. This is my first time offering it for, you know, humanity, opening it. It's open to both men and women. Anybody who wants to receive the Sophia Mysteries, receive the activations, receive the healing journey, and be able to hold that, heal your relationship to money, clear the black magic programming of the money slave system, of the ruling through violence and oppression, so you're not fearing that, so you're not being run by that anymore, and to really manifest material abundance in service to the sacred in and through your life. I want to say just a brief outline for how this journey works. We start actually by doing a very deep healing process, because the reality is that most of us have on a subconscious level some very, very negative programming, beliefs, and fears that are subconsciously controlling us in and through our relationship to money and power. And there is a healing journey that we really need to go on. There's healing work that we have to do, and reprogramming work of our relationship to money, of our relationship to power, in order to stabilize in sacred wealth consciousness. So the first part of the program is healing past life money wounds. It's healing karmic money wounds. It's healing, you know, clearing the black magic of the money slave system. It is going through your maternal and your paternal lines and releasing the burdens of your ancestors, paving the way for sacred wealth consciousness to be woven into your life, and then reprogramming your money mindset so that you are serving the divine in and through your relationship to money, so that you were working through magnetism and attraction principle rather than force over. It's sort of like it's like an energy like this, whereas sacred wealth operates more from this like that halo, right? Like that drawing things in, because you've become the light, right? So we have to help you reprogram your relationship to wealth so it's operating in that capacity. And the first 3 to 4 months of the journey will be around that. You will be receiving regular healing transmissions, regular teachings, and we are also doing a 40-day sadhana. So this is a deep spiritual practice where we will be doing calling out to the divine to manifest wealth in your life. And every day you will receive unique reprogramming exercises to do with your subconscious mind, so that you're stabilizing in sacred wealth consciousness. The second part of the journey, this is sort of the middle part, we will be learning about sacred pleasure, magic, and manifestation. And I just want to talk about this. There can be some keys in here for those of you who are tuning in. You know, we're going to really be learning how to manifest, use through the power of Shakti, through the power of Sophia, through the power of the feminine. And
I'm just going to type the link in. A couple people are asking.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So you're going to be learning how to manifest through the power of the feminine principle. And so I want to talk with you a little bit about that, because in our modern world, we are taught that in order to make money, right, you've sort of got to like force and hump, and it's got to be hard, and there's like this linear thing that goes on. And one of the things I say about sacred wealth, and one of the things I say, if you look into ancient Egypt, how they manifested all of those beautiful structures and all of that majesty that we see, that to this day, we have no idea from our present level of consciousness how they built those pyramids. And let me tell you how they built them. we would call it, in our consciousness today, we would call it magic. They were using magic. The feminine power, okay? The feminine power, the power that can like have nothing and produce a whole child out of thin air, right? That's magic. When you walk into the forest, I remember my first experience of magic as a child. I was playing in the woods and I found this raspberry bush. I literally found this wild raspberry. I put that thing in my mouth, and like as the juices like came in and lit up like all my neurons, the wonder that like this didn't come from a grocery store, this didn't come from my mommy, it didn't come from my fridge at home, it came from the wild. It came from nothing. Who grew this? It just manifested in the woods, right? It just manifested out of thin air, and I could feel the love in that berry, like it had created itself just to nurture me, just to like delight and please and fill my soul with nutrients. And it was like this shaking went through me as I ate that wild raspberry, and it was like magic, right? And it's also interesting because raspberry bushes and raspberry leaves are a traditional herbal medicine for healing the womb. They're traditional herbal medicine for awakening the sensual, sacred feminine. So we are going to be learning how to manifest using the power of Shakti, using the power of pleasure, using the power of the womb consciousness, using the power of the Holy Sophia, using the power of what we would call magic. So I say that, you know, the Sacred Wealth Academy, it's a magic school. I'm drawing in all the like witches and sorceresses and the powerful sacred feminine warlocks and wizards and those who part of the love of nature and wanting to work with nature and wanting to work with Prakriti and wanting to work with Shakti consciousness to manifest your desires. So the middle part of the academy is really learning how to manifest using tantric principles, using pleasure and magical practices, sex magic practices, Shakti practices that you can bring into your life to help you make quantum leaps. That's the other thing. It's like if you use masculine power, which is more linear and constructive and like we could not build the pyramids to this day using masculine power. You would have to use Shakti. You would have to use magic to materialize the pyramids in the way that they were built. And really the ancient Egyptian society used magical principles to rule everything in it. And so this is going to be a training in, and you know, first, and I want to say this, first things first, you've got to learn to manifest through your individual desire nature. You have to learn how to meet your own needs. You have to learn how to become sourced, like in your own source, meeting your own needs, fulfilling your own desires materially before you can really ascend into that sacred leader archetype where you can start to grow your organization and expand your service, where you're manifesting reality for more than just you, where you're nurturing and you're taking care of employees, or you're serving a larger body with your work, where you are, you know, manifesting for the collective. You have to start with you. So in this part of the journey, it's all going to be around helping you materialize your desires, learning how to manifest, learning how to use magic, learning how to use Shakti to make your dreams and your desires a reality. Finally, in the third part of the journey, we will go in and receive those initiations of the kings and queens, right? The pine cone, the sacred pine cone on the scepter, the raising of the serpentine life force, the activation of the pineal gland, the activation of God consciousness, understanding what is the right to rule, what does it mean to be a noble, and what deep spiritual initiations and preparation do we have to receive on a soul level. Okay, so most of my work, for those of you who don't know me, I am a channel, number one, And I work very deeply in the Akashic Records. And the Akashic Records are basically the storehouse of all of our programming. That's like the easiest way to describe them. Like if you're accessing the Akashic Record for your soul, you're going to be accessing all the impressions, all the experiences you've ever had at soul level that have made you into the person that you are today. And so when you are working with healing in and through the Akashic Records, we are doing, very deep levels of clearing in your subconscious mind. And we are also activating like divine codes. We are activating levels of your soul or levels of your God consciousness to awaken, levels of your life purpose, levels of your connection to your higher self or to your divine wisdom channel, so that you can actually become a sacred agent of the divine in and through your relationship to wealth. Will also be, one of the things that I've really learned is like, really, how do we support sacred wealth consciousness within our current society? And especially because most of my clientele are people that your main community tends to be like new age communities, spiritual communities, hippie communities, where likely you're not really getting the reflection of like go for it, like go become rich. That's awesome. Like, in fact, you might even get shamed. You might even get sort of like these strange looks of like, what is it that, are you being selfish? Why aren't you giving your work away for free? Why aren't you doing X, Y, or Z? And so we have to learn how to become, how to be untouched in a way by the specific programming that the world of mankind, what might project on us as we step into our power as sacred leaders. How do you handle taking on bigger positions of visibility in the public eye as you grow in your wealth consciousness? How do you respond to the transformations that might take place in your friend network or in your family network or with your partner as you commit to embodying deeper and deeper levels of this sacred God wealth consciousness in your life? How do you handle those trials and tribulations and grow in grace as a leader, as a steward of the material plane here at this time? And, we'll be also really looking at, in that part of the course, the really deep activations of your life's mission, and making, a sacred commitment to the divine, to be in deep service to that. And, my goal with the Academy is that at the end of this 9-month journey, you will literally be reborn. You will be reborn as someone who is a fountain of wisdom, a fountain of abundance, a fountain of grace, that you're not going to have any resistance or struggles anymore in your relationship to money, in your relationship to material wealth, that you are going to be a clear channel, and that you will feel confident in a position of power, that you will feel confident being a leader in your uniqueness as God, as an agent of God, in the very, very unique and specific design of who you are in God. And so, one of the reflections that I get with my work all the time is like, people hear what I'm doing and it's like it activates all kinds of things in them, because I've chosen to not compromise who I am on a soul level in order to, please what the world kind of is ready to hear or ready to accept. And I've gone through my own journey of releasing my people-pleasing tendencies. And because I faced the money power elite, the whole shadow of the patriarchy very early on in my life, I realized it's not something I need to be afraid of. I survived it. I rose up through that, right? And I want to give that transmission to others so that we can have more people, more beings on this planet that are operating in their brilliance, you know, where you're operating in your unique divinity, because each of us has such a unique genius that wants to flow through us. And so that you are going to come out being like no longer having the financial programming that is squashing that and repressing that and putting it under the sword and putting it under the blade. And so that you are going to be like this vortex for the world. And so that's really my goal, is like a vortex of genius and a very wealthy vortex of genius that you can come through and manifest as at the end of this journey. So I just want to give everybody the link again. It's wakingbeauty.com/sacred-wealth-academy. And yeah, it looks like Alex put it in the chat section, so you can access the link there. I will go over just a few other things. We have, okay, the Sacred Sales bonus. I know it says that early bird bonus isn't live anymore. It's actually still up. I didn't change the page. So if you sign up for this, you're gonna get the Sacred Sales home study program. It's still accessible to everybody in the group. So I'm just going to make that available. It was an early bird bonus, but we didn't take it down. So it's still there. I'll talk with you a little bit about Sacred Sales. You know, sales is the actual method of manifesting in our money system. So this is where the gateway from one world to another opens. When we correlate this to our sacred sexual anatomy, sales actually correlates to the cervix in women. So when when a child needs to be born and needs to transition from the womb into the vaginal canal, which is going to take it into the world of man, the portal way that needs to open is the cervix. The cervix is a stargate. If you actually look at it, it looks like a little star, and it opens and it allows consciousness to come from one world into this dimension. And when we look at, and this is just an example of how we will go through business skills in the academy. When you are doing sales, what you are actually doing is you are you have a vision, right, that you want to manifest in the world. The actual mechanism that allows you to manifest that would be this stargate of sales, and being able to really activate your power as a sacred agent who can manifest the vision. And there is a sacred relationship that happens when you are speaking with somebody about your work, and whether that's going to be a match, whether there's going to be a union made there that allows a new creation to be born. The other thing I say about sales is it's essentially like the consent conversation. Like if you were going to start a sexual relationship with someone, there's an important kind of conversation that needs to be had about, like, what are your boundaries? Like, have you been tested? Like, what are your intentions for this relationship? Is this something that we both want to do? And as spiritual people, a lot of times we ignore the sales process because we've gotten such negative programming around it. And so sacred sales really teaches you how to go about that process in a very empowered way, how to hold that opening for somebody, because usually if you're working in transformation, you're working in a spiritual industry, like somebody is wanting to transform their life, you know how to hold that stargate open without your lower self shutting it down. And you're also able to have very clear, conscious, compassionate communication that is, understanding the sacred use of the money that's exchanged, understanding the energy exchange involved. And this is just something we need to learn, So yes, you're learning magic, but you're also going to be learning magic within the context of our current money system, of our current business system, so that you can work magic in and through the world order and not be negatively impacted by the way most of us are conditioned when we're in our wounds, our money wounds, our business wounds, and we can't actually hold the sacred. We can't actually work magic. So you'll get sacred sales if you sign up, and it's the pay in full is about $2,000. It's $1,999. The payment plan is $303 down and 10 monthly payments of $199, which comes out, it's like $2,300 if you do the payment plan. This is for 9 months of training. And for everybody that pays in full, there's a bonus where you will get a 1-hour intensive in your Akashic record with me to do specific healing of your money wounds and to do whatever we need to do, track your life purpose, track your gifts, and help you to make the most out of the program and have that individual activation. So that's the bonus if you do pay in full. We will be starting this journey next week, and we start the 40-day practice in February, about the second week in February. So just so you know the timelines, and if anybody would like to talk with me about Sacred Wealth, if you're interested in the Academy, you'd like to know if this is right for you, you can send me an email to kara@wakingbeauty.com. And I will do my best to set us up with a call either over the weekend or early next week so that you can have some one-on-one support in making a decision if that's something that you need. So that's what I have to share here today. And I really hope that everybody who has tuned in, whether you're going to join the Academy or not, that you take to heart at the end of this call that we need nobles again. We need the noble servants, the sacred servants of humanity to step into their power. We need you. We need the gifts, your genius, the purpose that is alive in your heart. We need you to manifest that. All of us do. You know, it's just like, how happy has it made me to meet this Lord right here, you know, and he's stepped into his gifts on so many levels, and now we can like have this like magical co-creation, and then we can meet other amazing beings that are doing their gifts, and we can start having like, you know, we'll start our own society.
That's it.
We'll start our own initiatives. The more of us that come into power, the more change that we can make collectively. And we need you guys. We need you guys to step up. We need you guys to step into your genius, to step into your power, to become responsible in being who you really are. Because when you're who you really are, you activate everybody else to become who they are. I've seen my whole family lineage change. Like literally, like my family line is not, is very, we're like muggles, really, you know, like they're muggles. They're like becoming magical now. Like my mom is just like straight up calling herself a witch at this point in time. And it's just like, you can change your life, you can change your lineage, you can live in abundance, and you can really, really fulfill the purpose that you're here to fulfill. And you don't have to disassociate from pleasure, from the divine feminine, from your magic, from the flowing. Actually, we need you to go more into that magic and that pleasure and that flow in order to really manifest sacred wealth. Likely, though, you just need to reprogram your money story to match the ecstatic flow of who you really are. And that is what the Academy and Sacred Wealth is going to do for you. Thank you so much, everybody who joined us here today. Thank you, Alexander, for all of your wisdom and your divine masculine Knight of Templar.
I just basically sit here and get absolutely blown open by the amazing download that comes through you. And I'm certain there's no one else on the planet quite like you who's bringing through this wisdom in the way you are right now. And I know I've grown so much, even just from being on this call right now. It just blows my mind again and again. Thank you. And for all the support on a technical level. I would not have been able to do this video seminar. So thank you, everybody. Can we like maybe open up the lines so I could like say
hi to people?
Yeah.
How do
Yeah,
we
we
do
could
that?
unmute.
Okay.
You can. I believe they can unmute themselves though.
Unmute all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's going to be really overwhelming if we do that. No, we
It's
don't
too
wanna do
much.
that. Yeah, just.
Well, we just want to say goodbye. If you guys are here and you want to say hi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Tina.
Thank you, Kara.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Angela.
Thank you, Kara.
Welcome. Thank you guys for being here. So fun.
Bye.
I really
Thank
love
you.
this. It's so much more intimate.
Right.
Like we can
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
connect. Thank you guys. Mwah, mwah, mwah. We should have like some music. Hold on. I'm gonna play some music.
Get a playlist.
I gotta play this out. What is the right music for right now?
Yeah.
Something like upbeat.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Like, nope,
I
not that
listen
one.
to pure kirtan and like sacred feminine music at all times. No, I'm
Just
gonna play
sing. Your voice is awesome, Kara.
Oh.
Just sing yourself.
Oh no, wait, we should have Alex sing.
What should we sing?
Okay, you know more songs than I know. You're so good.
We'll wait for something to come through.
Because we're the masters of our own fate.
And the captains of our own souls.
And there's no need for hesitate. Sign up for the Sacred Wealth Academy. Don't hesitate. I'm the master of your own fate. Okay. Mwah. Love you guys.
Love you.
Bye.
Recording.
Bye.